there comes a kind of tiredness that doesn't show up in your body first, it shows up in your thoughts. In the pause between two tasks, in the sigh you let out before making tea, in the silence after someone praises you and you smile but don't feel anything inside. That's the kind of tired I carried with me into my 60s. It wasn't the kind of exhaustion a nap could fix. No, it was quieter than that. It was the tiredness of always running, and not knowing why anymore. You see, most of my life, I was chasing something. Or maybe a better way to put it is, I was trying not to fall behind. Behind what? I couldn't have told you then. Maybe behind other people. Maybe behind some idea of the person I was supposed to be by now. Maybe just behind the clock that always ticked a little too loudly in my ears. When I was younger, I thought ambition was a virtue. I wore it like armor. Always doing. Always reaching. Always trying to earn my worth in some way I couldn't quite define. I built my days like ladders, each task a rung toward a vague feeling of enough. And for a while, that kept me going. But it also kept me tired. Then 60 came, quietly, like a whisper at the edge of the room. No trumpet, no ceremony. Just the slow realization that I had lived more of my life than I had left to live. That wasn't a sad thought, not exactly. But it was sobering. It made me look at how I was spending my time. What I was still carrying. What I was still chasing. And the first thing I noticed was the weight. The weight of trying to be seen. I had spent so many years hoping someone would notice me, not just the things I did, but the effort behind them. The invisible work. The inner struggle. The way I tried to be everything for everyone. I wasn't loud about it, but I wanted someone to say, "I see how hard you're trying." And when they didn't, or when they did but I didn't believe them, I chased harder. I thought if I could just do a little more, I'd finally feel like I mattered. But 60 has a way of changing your lens. It doesn't ask for permission, it just shifts your focus. And suddenly, I wasn't interested in proving anything anymore. Not because I felt I had arrived, but because I was tired of running in circles that led nowhere. I remember one evening, early spring, windows slightly open, air just cool enough to remind you you're alive. I sat in my favorite chair, tea in hand, and I felt still. Not happy. Not sad. Just present. And in that stillness, a question came: what if you stopped chasing? At first, it made me uneasy. If I stopped striving, who would I be? What would I become? Would I just dissolve into the background, unnoticed, unnecessary? But then another thought followed: what if you're already enough, not because of what you do, but because you are? It sounds simple. But when you've spent your life equating your value with your usefulness, it's a radical thought. That night, I wrote something in my notebook, something I hadn't dared say out loud before: I'm tired of performing my worth. Just that. No conclusion. No plan. Just a truth. And that truth became the beginning. Not of some big transformation. I didn't change my wardrobe. I didn't start meditating at sunrise. I didn't move to a cottage in the woods. I just began paying attention to what I was chasing, and why. Was I really doing that task because it mattered to me, or because I wanted someone to approve of me? Was I saying yes out of love, or out of fear that I'd be less valuable if I said no? Was I rushing because something was urgent, or because I didn't want to be left behind? It was uncomfortable, at first. Like peeling off clothes that no longer fit, but had become familiar. But it was also freeing. And here's what I began to notice: every time I stopped chasing something that wasn't mine to carry, a little more peace came in. Not all at once. Not forever. But enough. Enough to breathe easier. Enough to listen more kindly to myself. Enough to begin again, from a different place, a slower place. So this is where the story begins. Not with a list of all the things I gave up, but with a quiet confession: I was tired. Not because life was too much, but because I had been chasing too many things that weren't truly mine. And at 60, I finally sat still long enough to hear that truth. And now, I want to tell you, gently, honestly, about what I stopped chasing after that. You spend enough years trying to be good enough, and eventually, you start mistaking applause for love. I didn't always know that. In fact, for a long time, I thought they were the same. That being liked meant I was safe. That being admired meant I was worthy. So I learned how to smile in the right moments, how to nod, how to soften my truth when it made others uncomfortable, how to apologize even when I hadn't done anything wrong. I was polite, pleasant, understandable. And I was exhausted. In my 30s and 40s, it looked like ambition, like being dependable, high-functioning, respected. I was the person people came to because I rarely said no, because I kept things together. But underneath that efficiency was a quiet desperation. Please don't leave me, please keep approving, please tell me I'm doing okay, even when I'm not sure I am. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even conscious. Just a slow, constant tilt of my identity toward what others expected of me. I could shift shape depending on the room. I could blend in with whoever I was with. And for a while, that made me feel powerful, like I could belong anywhere. But the truth is, when you spend years becoming who others need, you eventually forget who you are when no one's watching. And that forgetting, it takes something from you. Something soft. Something honest. I think it started changing around the time I turned 60, not suddenly, but slowly, the way fog clears from a window in the morning. I began to notice when I was editing myself mid-sentence. I began to notice the weight I carried after small conversations, wondering if I'd said too much or not enough. I began to notice how often I swallowed feelings that were true just to keep the peace. And one day, I caught myself mid-apology for being too quiet during a phone call, and I stopped. Why am I apologizing for who I am? It wasn't about that call. It was about the pattern. The need to keep earning approval even in the smallest moments. And it hit me, with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I had made a habit of disappearing inside myself so others wouldn't feel discomfort. So I started small. I let myself speak plainly, even when my voice trembled. I told the truth when someone asked how I was, instead of offering the usual, "I'm fine." I said I don't know without shame. I started asking myself, do I actually want to do this, or do I just want to be liked? And you know what? Some people didn't like the changes. Some pulled away. Some grew quiet. Some didn't understand. And yes, that hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. Approval is a powerful drug, and withdrawal leaves its mark. But something else started happening too. I began to feel real. Not impressive. Not untouchable. Just real. I cried more. I laughed differently. I showed up to conversations with less polish, but more presence. I didn't need to perform my story, I could simply live it. I started to feel what it was like to be known, not just appreciated. And that kind of knowing, it's quiet, but it stays. It doesn't rise and fall with public opinion. It doesn't vanish when you say something unpopular. It doesn't leave the room when you're messy, complicated, or slow. It just stays. Because it isn't based on performance. It's based on truth. Now, I won't tell you I've mastered it. Some days I still feel the old pull, the urge to explain myself, to soften my opinions, to smile when I'm tired. But more and more, I catch it. And when I do, I remind myself. You don't need to be approved of to belong here. That's a lesson I wish I had learned sooner. But maybe 60 was the perfect time. Maybe I needed those decades of chasing to finally understand that what I was running toward, recognition, validation, belonging, wasn't something others could give me in a lasting way. It had to come from me. From inside. From the quiet willingness to look at myself honestly and say, even if no one claps, even if no one notices, even if I disappoint someone by being real, I am still worthy. And I am. Not because I've achieved something remarkable. Not because I finally fit someone's idea of who I should be. But because I've stopped performing. And in the space where the performance used to be, I've found a kind of peace I didn't know I was missing. I stopped chasing approval. And strangely, that's when I began to feel loved, not because I was proving myself, but because I had finally come home to myself. For most of my life, I carried around a quiet idea of who I should be, not loudly, not in words I ever said out loud, but in the way I moved through the world. She was always a little more polished than me. She spoke softer, but always at the right moment. She was never too much or too little. She had more discipline. She was graceful in her disappointments and calm in her doubts. She never overthought things. She always said the right thing at the right time. She didn't cry in the grocery store. She didn't lose her temper when she was tired. She didn't forget birthdays, or leave dishes in the sink overnight. And she certainly didn't lie awake at night replaying every conversation from the day. She was the woman I thought I was supposed to be, eventually. I never gave her a deadline, but I always assumed she was just around the corner. If I just read the right book, took the right course, made the right decision, said yes to the right thing and no to the other, she would arrive. And when she did, life would begin to feel easier, smoother, lighter. Like finally, I had done enough to become the kind of person I could be proud of. But here's the thing no one tells you, perfection is not a destination, it's a mirage. And the closer you think you're getting to it, the farther it slips away. Because the more you fix, the more you find to fix. There's always another layer. Another room to clean. Another version of you that could be just a bit better. I spent decades tweaking myself, not drastically, just little things. The way I worded a sentence. The amount I shared. The shape of my body. The tone of my voice. The size of my joy. I adjusted and adapted, always with the hope that eventually I'd become the version of me that would finally feel like enough. But 60 brought with it a kind of reckoning. Not all at once, more like a slow unraveling of expectations I had carried like a second skin. I looked around at the life I had built, and I realized I was still waiting. Still thinking that someday I'd finally become the real me. The version I could finally accept. And I remember this quiet, humbling moment. I was folding laundry, nothing poetic, just cotton and towels and the soft hum of a fan in the background. And it hit me, what if she's not coming? What if there is no better version waiting? What if this is me, not perfect, not polished, but present? And I stood there, hands still mid-fold, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness. Not regret. But relief. Because chasing that perfect version had made me feel like a constant failure. Even in moments of joy, of progress, of honesty, there was always that whisper, you're not there yet. But now, what if there is no there? What if I've been home this whole time, and just didn't realize it? That question changed something. It didn't make me give up on growth. No, I still care, I still try, I still want to be kind and thoughtful and gentle with the people I love. But now, I try because I love, not because I lack. I stopped chasing the woman I thought I was supposed to be. And in the absence of that chase, I met someone else, the woman I already am. And she is softer than I imagined. She still overthinks. She still makes the same old jokes. She forgets appointments sometimes and cries when the music hits the right spot. But she's also resilient. She's still here. She's weathered every year, every version of herself. She's stayed. And that, I've come to believe, is worth honoring. I no longer ask myself, how do I become her? I ask, can I be kind to myself today? And most days, that's enough. There's an honesty that comes when you stop trying to perfect yourself and start learning to live with yourself. An intimacy. A quiet peace. Like exhaling after holding your breath for years. It's not glamorous. It's not impressive. But it's real. And at this point in my life, I'll take real over perfect every single time. I used to believe that being busy meant I mattered. If I had a full calendar, a long to-do list, a day stacked with obligations, it made me feel like I was doing life right. Like I was contributing. Like I was needed. And if I was needed, then I must be valuable. The truth is, I wore productivity like armor. It kept me from having to feel too much. If I stayed in motion, I didn't have to sit with the questions that scared me. I didn't have to face the quiet ache inside. So I filled my days with noise, errands, projects, favors, emails, even good things. I said yes to everything, partly out of kindness, but also out of fear. Fear that if I slowed down, the silence would show me something I wasn't ready to see. Sometimes I wondered why I felt so restless, even when things were going well. I'd have a day where everything got done, everyone was satisfied, nothing went wrong, and still, I'd lie awake at night with a strange emptiness in my chest. A question I couldn't name. A quiet panic I couldn't explain. Looking back, I see it now. I was busy, but not present. I was achieving, but not arriving. My days were full, but my soul was hungry. And I didn't know how to feed it without motion. Turning 60 didn't fix that overnight. In fact, at first, it made me panic more. I thought, time is running out, I have to do more, faster, now. But something strange happened. The more I tried to speed up, the more resistance I felt inside. Not physical resistance, emotional. My spirit, it seemed, was tired. And not just from aging. It was tired from running without rest for decades. Then one day, I watched the rain fall. That's it. I had nowhere to be, nothing urgent to do. So I made tea, sat by the window, and just watched. The drops fell like a rhythm I'd forgotten existed. Unhurried. Honest. Enough. And for a moment, I felt something shift inside me. Like my heart exhaled. That day didn't make the headlines of my life. But it stayed with me. And it planted a question I couldn't ignore. What if you don't need to be busy to be worthy? I didn't have an answer. But I did start experimenting. I let myself do nothing, not as a reward, but as a right. I went for walks without counting steps. I sat in silence without reaching for a screen. I learned to drink my coffee hot instead of forgetting it on the counter. I stopped multitasking. I stopped filling space with noise. I stopped thinking rest had to be earned. At first, it was hard. I felt guilty. Lazy. Like I was failing some invisible system of measurement. But with time, the stillness became familiar. Even kind. And in that stillness, I started to hear my own thoughts again. Not the ones that shouted, the ones that whispered. The ones that said, slow down. This moment is enough. I still get things done. I still care. But I no longer confuse motion with meaning. I no longer believe that my worth is tied to my productivity. And I certainly don't judge my days by how many things I've crossed off a list. These days, I measure my days differently. By the quality of a conversation. By how deeply I listened. By whether I noticed the way the light fell across the table. By whether I laughed, not to entertain, but because something truly moved me. I stopped chasing the busy life. And in its place, I found something richer, a slow life. A life where I'm not rushing toward the end, but walking with it. A life that feels lived, not just filled. And I'll tell you something I didn't expect, people still love me. The world hasn't stopped turning. I'm still me, only softer, quieter, more at peace. So if you've spent your life rushing, if silence makes you nervous, if rest feels selfish, if you only feel valuable when you're doing something for someone else, maybe this part is for you. Because there's nothing wrong with caring deeply or doing good work. But when the noise becomes your identity, you forget who you are beneath it. I had to turn 60 to remember. And I'm so glad I did. For a long time, I thought helping meant fixing. That if someone I loved was in pain, it was my job to soothe it. If they were angry, I had to calm them. If they were lost, I had to find their path for them. I believed this was love, to jump in, to rescue, to rearrange the pieces of someone else's life until it made sense again. And when I couldn't do that, I felt helpless, guilty, even ashamed. Like I had failed them. You see, I'm a listener by nature. I pay attention. I notice the things people don't say. And over the years, that sensitivity turned into responsibility. I thought if I could just say the right thing, offer the right support, give the right advice, then maybe I could save them from their struggle, or at least ease it. It came from a good place. But somewhere along the way, I began to confuse compassion with control. I thought caring meant stepping in. I thought empathy meant carrying. I thought love meant doing the emotional heavy lifting for two. But you learn a lot about the limits of your influence when you've lived long enough. You begin to see that not everyone wants to be saved. That even those who say they want help often don't want to change. That advice, no matter how kind, can sound like judgment when someone isn't ready. That your presence, no matter how sincere, cannot rewrite someone else's story. It took me decades to accept that. And even now, I slip sometimes. I still have that instinct, to offer, to rescue, to smooth things over. But at 60, I've finally learned the difference between holding space and taking over. Between walking beside someone and trying to walk for them. There was a moment, maybe it seems small now, but it stays with me, when someone I loved made a choice I didn't agree with. I could see the consequences coming like a slow train. Every part of me wanted to speak, to plead, to explain. But instead, I stayed quiet. I listened. I nodded. I said, "I'm here if you need me." And I meant it. Later, they told me that my silence, my not trying to fix it, was what gave them the strength to face it themselves. That shook me. Because I had spent years believing that love was action. But maybe, sometimes, love is restraint. Maybe love is trusting someone to find their own way, even if it means watching them stumble. I don't mean giving up on people. I don't mean withdrawing affection or care. What I mean is, I've stopped chasing the role of the fixer. It's not mine to hold. It never really was. Now, when someone I love is in pain, I offer my ears, not my answers. I offer time, not tactics. I offer presence, not pressure. And you know what? That feels more honest. More human. More sustainable. Because the truth is, I was burning out trying to be the emotional glue for everyone else. I'd listen and absorb and comfort and advise, and then go home and collapse under the weight of it. I thought I was helping, but really, I was avoiding something. Avoiding the helplessness that comes with realizing we cannot spare people from their own becoming. There's a quiet grief in that realization. But there's also relief. When I stopped trying to fix people, I started trusting them. And that changed everything. These days, I still show up. I still care deeply. But I've stopped thinking it's my job to hold the world together. I've stopped thinking that love means never letting someone fall. Because sometimes, falling is how we learn to rise. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone you love, is to stand beside them, hands open, heart steady, and say, I believe in your strength, even if you don't yet. That, to me, is the kind of love that lasts. It's a strange thing, comparison. It sneaks in quietly, not through jealousy, but through doubt. You're having a perfectly decent day, and then someone mentions a trip they're taking, a promotion they've received, a marriage that's working, a child who's thriving, and suddenly, the light in your own life dims just a little. I never thought of myself as someone who competed. I didn't need to be the best, I didn't chase status. But still, I measured. Silently. Constantly. I measured how others were healing faster, moving on sooner, aging more gracefully. I measured who had deeper relationships, more purpose, better routines. And every time I measured, I came up short, not because their lives were better, but because I was holding the ruler in the wrong direction. The problem with comparison is that it reduces life to a series of parallel lines, when in truth, we're all on completely different maps. I know that now. But it took me years to see it. I spent too long looking sideways instead of inward. It's subtle, too. You see someone share something joyful, and instead of just being happy for them, something twists inside you, why not me? Why haven't I figured that out yet? What am I missing? Even when you're doing fine, comparison whispers that you're not quite there. That there's more to fix. That someone else has found the secret and you're still fumbling in the dark. And the worst part is, no one tells you you're doing it. Because on the outside, you're functioning. You're kind. You're generous. You're doing well. But inside, you're quietly chipping away at your own worth, wondering if your version of life is too small, too late, too behind. When I turned 60, something in me slowed down. Not because I suddenly became wiser, but because I was simply too tired to keep playing the game. I looked at the lives I was comparing myself to, and I asked, do I even want what they have? Or am I just afraid I'm missing something? That question changed everything. Because the truth was, I didn't want their marriage, their job, their routines. I wanted the feeling I imagined they had, peace, confidence, belonging. But that feeling doesn't come from what they have. It comes from how they live and what they have. And I realized, I could live that way, too. But not if I kept measuring my life against people who weren't living my story. I started noticing how much I had overlooked in my own days. The quiet rhythm of my mornings. The meals I cooked just for me. The friendships that were still growing, slowly and honestly. The softness I was beginning to cultivate inside myself. None of those things would impress anyone. But they were real. And they were mine. So I stopped asking, am I as far along as them, and started asking, am I being honest with myself today? I stopped trying to make my life look good, and started trying to make it feel good. And that meant letting go of the ruler. The chart. The map that said, by this age, you should be, because who wrote that map? And why was I trying to follow it? Some people found love at 25. I found it again in solitude, at 62. Some people retired with plans. I retired with questions. Some people found community in noise. I found mine in silence, in books, in tea, in writing notes to myself. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's enough. Now, when I catch myself drifting into comparison, I pause. I remind myself, their path is not mine. Their pace is not mine. Their purpose is not mine. And that doesn't make either of us wrong, just different. There's a freedom that comes with letting go of the scoreboard. A quiet joy in rooting for others without turning against yourself. I've learned how to do that. Not perfectly, but more often. I've learned how to look at someone else's light and let it warm me, instead of burn me. I've learned how to be inspired without being diminished. And slowly, I've started to see my life as it really is, not as it compares, but as it stands. On its own feet. In its own timing. With its own quiet kind of grace. I stopped chasing the life I thought I was supposed to have. And in the stillness that followed, I began to love the one I already do. They always said I was strong. You're the strong one. You always hold it together. You never fall apart. I used to take pride in that, in being the one people could rely on. The one who didn't cry in front of others. The one who kept her pain tucked neatly behind a polite smile. I was the listener, the steady hand, the calm voice. I could walk through grief with my shoulders square. I could bury heartbreak in productivity. I could hold everyone else's world together, even as mine quietly cracked underneath. But here's the truth they don't tell you about always being strong. It's lonely. It's cold. And eventually, it's unsustainable. Because no one ever thinks to ask the strong one if she's okay. No one checks in on the person who seems fine. And over time, that strength becomes a mask, one you forget how to take off. Until one day, you're sitting alone in the dark, and you realize you don't even know what softness feels like anymore. That realization didn't come to me all at once. It arrived slowly, like water soaking through the corners of an old box. The moment I really noticed it, I mean really noticed, was when a dear friend lost someone they loved. They cried in front of me, fully and without apology. And I envied them. Not for their grief, of course, but for their permission to express it. For how naturally they let it move through them. For how unafraid they seemed to fall apart. I couldn't remember the last time I had let myself be seen like that. My own sadness had become something I tucked away into quiet hours, into empty rooms, into the space between responsibilities. I had turned vulnerability into a private act. And in doing so, I had cut myself off from a kind of connection I didn't even know I missed. Turning 60 didn't make me fragile, but it made me honest. I started asking myself, what am I protecting with all this strength? Who am I trying to impress? Who am I trying not to disappoint? And maybe more importantly, what would happen if I allowed myself to be soft? At first, it felt dangerous. To cry in conversation. To say, I'm not okay. To admit that I didn't have the answers. But with every small risk I took, with every honest word I let out, something inside me eased. I didn't become weaker. I became more whole. I started noticing how often I'm fine was a lie. I started replacing it with softer truths. I'm tired today. I'm carrying something heavy. I don't know yet. And to my surprise, people didn't run away. They leaned in. They softened, too. Because when you let go of being strong all the time, you give others permission to do the same. You create space for something gentler, something more real. I'm still resilient. That hasn't changed. But I don't confuse resilience with silence anymore. I don't confuse being capable with being invulnerable. and I no longer think that falling apart makes me any less worthy of love. In fact, some of the most tender, true moments I've shared with others have happened not in my strength, but in my softness. In the cracks. In the stumbles. In the quiet admissions that I'm still figuring things out. These days, I measure strength differently. Not by how much I can carry without flinching, but by how willing I am to admit when I need rest. When I need comfort. When I need someone to sit beside me and just be there. So no, I don't chase the old kind of strength anymore. I don't aim to be unshakable. I aim to be true. To be kind with myself. To let my heart be seen, even when it trembles. And you know what? Life has felt more spacious ever since. Because when you stop pretending you're fine all the time, you start realizing how many others have been pretending too, waiting for someone to go first. So if that's you, if you're tired of being the strong one, maybe this is your permission. You don't have to hold it all. You're allowed to be carried sometimes, too. I used to feel like I was always running out of time. Even when I was young, especially when I was young, there was this invisible clock ticking in the back of my mind. You have to get your life together by 30. Find love before it's too late. Figure out your purpose now, or you'll regret it. Don't fall behind. Don't waste time. Don't be the last one. I don't remember who planted that voice in me. Maybe it wasn't any one person, but the collective noise of a world that values early success, fast progress, constant motion. But once the voice was in me, I listened to it. I hurried, even when there was no reason to. I filled my calendar. I mapped my milestones. I rushed through seasons I didn't even realize were beautiful until they were gone. And when I didn't meet my timelines, when love took longer, or healing came slower, or clarity refused to show up on cue, I blamed myself. I thought I was late. I thought I had failed. I thought everyone else had found the secret to living on time, and I had missed it. It's exhausting, living that way. Like every year is a deadline. Like every moment is a test. And even the quiet parts, the small joys, the simple mornings, the peaceful afternoons, feel like things you have to earn with progress. But here's what happened. I turned 60, and the clock didn't stop ticking, but I stopped running. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because I finally realized there's no finish line. Maybe because I started losing people, not in a tragic way, just in the way life shifts, and I saw that no one really figures it all out. Maybe because my body began asking for slower days, and I didn't have the energy to argue with it anymore. But more than anything, I think I simply got tired of hurrying through a life I actually wanted to be present for. So I started letting myself go slow. At first, it was uncomfortable. Like I was being lazy, or unproductive. I would make a cup of tea and just sit, not scroll, not read, not plan, just sit. And I'd feel this anxious pull in me, like I was wasting something precious. But with time, I started asking myself, what if this is the precious thing? This quiet moment. This breath. This ordinary day. I stopped seeing time as an enemy. I started seeing it as a companion, one that walks with me, not ahead of me. And in doing that, I realized how much I had missed by chasing the future. I had missed the joy in the in-between. The laughter that doesn't come from achievement, but from shared glances. The calm of a slow morning. The miracle of making something, a meal, a letter, a thought, without rushing it. The way people open up when you're not trying to move them anywhere. I don't try to catch up anymore. I don't measure my life by where I thought I'd be. I look at where I am, and I ask, can I be kind to this version of me, right here, right now? Because the truth is, none of us are late. We're just living on our own clocks. Some of us bloom early. Some of us bloom again. Some of us don't bloom at all, but we root deeply and hold others steady. And that's beautiful too. I've learned that time isn't something you win. It's something you live. And these days, I live it slowly. On purpose. With space to notice. With room to change my mind. With less urgency and more presence. So if you feel behind, if you feel like you should have been somewhere else by now, I hope you hear this. There is no supposed to. There's just here. There's just now. And there's just you, already enough, already right on time. You haven't missed your life. You're in it. And it's not a race. It never was. There is a quiet desperation that lives in so many of us, the need to be seen as useful, as valuable, as someone who contributes. For most of my life, I wore that need like a second skin. I didn't call it insecurity. I called it responsibility. I told myself it was noble to be dependable, generous, always available. And maybe it was. But buried inside that devotion to others was a deep, persistent question: am I enough, just as I am? I didn't know how to sit still without offering something. I didn't know how to enter a room without scanning it for who might need help. I measured my worth by how many people needed me, and how much I could endure without breaking. If I was tired, I kept going. If I was hurting, I smiled anyway. If I needed something, I tucked it away until others had been taken care of first. It wasn't that I thought I was unworthy. I just thought I had to keep earning the right to be here. And so I made myself useful. All the time. But usefulness is a tricky thing. Because when people start relying on you for your strength, your insight, your steadiness, it's hard to know whether they love you, or just the way you hold things together. And after a while, even you forget where the line is. What happens when you can't be the helper? What happens when you're the one who needs space, or silence, or softness? I didn't know how to answer that for a long time. I just kept pushing. Kept proving. Kept hoping someone would notice all the invisible ways I was trying. Turning 60 changed that, not because I stopped being needed, but because I started needing something different from myself. I wanted to be loved, not for my usefulness, but for my being. And so, I began the quiet work of letting go of the need to prove myself. I started by saying no, gently, when I would have said yes out of guilt. I started asking for help, even when it made my voice shake. I started allowing myself to do things simply because I enjoyed them, not because they would impress anyone. It felt strange, even selfish, at first. But slowly, I started to feel something unfamiliar: peace. Not the kind that comes from ticking off tasks, but the kind that comes from knowing, even if I do nothing today, I am still allowed to exist. One evening, a friend called me, needing advice. And I listened, not as the fixer, not as the wise one, just as myself. I told them, I don't know what to say. But I'm here. And to my surprise, they sighed in relief. That's enough, they said. That moment stayed with me. Because all my life, I thought enough was something you had to earn. That it came after a certain number of sacrifices, achievements, acts of service. But maybe enough isn't earned. Maybe it's simply accepted. Now, I no longer keep a tally of how valuable I've been in a given week. I no longer judge myself by what I've contributed. I've stopped chasing the illusion of deservedness. Because the truth is, life is not a merit badge system. It is not a transaction. Love, real love, is not given in exchange for usefulness. It is given because you are here. Breathing. Being. Showing up, imperfect, human, real. These days, I remind myself often, you don't have to prove your worth to belong. You already do. Sometimes, I write it on a sticky note and put it where I'll see it. Not because I forget, but because the world still tries to make me forget. It still whispers, do more. Be more. Prove yourself. And I've learned to whisper back, no, thank you. I've done enough today just by being here. So if you are tired of constantly justifying your place in the world, if you are aching to be enough without performing, this part is for you. You are not what you do for others. You are not what you produce. You are not a sum of tasks completed. You are a person. And that is already enough. There is a kind of peace that doesn't come from adding anything new, it comes from laying things down. From unclenching the fists that held on too tightly. From no longer chasing after a version of life that was never truly yours to begin with. That's what I've found, now that I've stopped running. I didn't arrive at some perfect place. I didn't wake up one morning and suddenly feel whole. It didn't come with fireworks, or a ceremony, or even a clear sense of arrival. What came instead was something quieter. A sense that I no longer had to fix or prove or achieve my way into being okay. I used to think life was about becoming. Now, I think it's more about remembering who I was before the noise. Before the expectations. Before I learned how to hide the softest parts of myself just to feel safe. And what I've remembered is this, I've always been enough. Even when I was lost. Even when I was trying too hard. Even when I was exhausted and didn't know why. I was never broken. I was just buried, under layers of obligation, fear, pressure, performance. Now, when I walk through my days, I carry less. Not because life is easier, but because I've stopped picking up everything that isn't mine. I no longer rush to fill silence. I no longer apologize for resting. I no longer seek validation in places that never knew how to offer it. And in that space, that soft, open space, I've found room for joy again. Not loud joy. Not the kind you post about. But quiet joy. The kind that comes when the sun hits your hands just right. When you laugh at something small. When you realize you haven't been afraid for a while. I've also found room for grief. The kind I used to outrun. The kind that catches up when you finally slow down. But I no longer fear it. I let it sit beside me now. Because I've learned that grief isn't here to ruin me, it's here to remind me how deeply I've loved, how fully I've lived. You see, stopping the chase didn't make my life perfect. It made it real. And I think, at this stage of life, real is all I want. I want slow mornings. Honest conversations. Days without performance. I want to belong to myself again, not in some dramatic way, but in the small, steady choices I make. To rest. To say no. To show up anyway. To forgive myself for what I didn't know then. To love the version of me who has survived so much and still gets up to make tea, to smile at strangers, to listen to the rain. This isn't a story about giving up. It's a story about giving back to myself. The time. The care. The presence I once gave away so freely, hoping it would buy me a seat at the table. Turns out, I've always had a seat. I just needed to stop standing in the corner, waiting for permission. So now, I sit. I breathe. I let the light fall on my face without asking if I deserve it. I let the wind move through my hair without trying to tame it. I let myself be, not because I've finally earned it, but because I never had to. And if you're still chasing, still trying to catch up, to be more, to do more, to become the person you think you were supposed to be by now, I hope this story reminds you, you can stop. You can rest. You can let go. You are not too late. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not unfinished. You are simply here. And here is enough.